Because to me, I think creativity often gets lumped with artistry and the reality is creativity bleeds into everything. It's how we exist in the world. It's how we approach problems. It's how we find solutions. So I have met so many very technical, logistical people that say, "Oh, I'm not creative." And I'm like, wait, you're not calling that art, that code that you built, that infrastructure to build up that whole entire API or whatever it is. I think that we just allow that term just to get lumped with artists, and I disagree with that across the board.
Welcome to ODSC's AIX podcast, your gateway to the latest in everything AI. Whether you're a seasoned AI expert or exploring how to bring AI into your work or career, we bring you insights from the best minds in the field. We host researchers, practitioners, and industry leaders shaping the future of AI and how it's being applied across research, product, and industry. This episode is sponsored by ODSC AI East, the premier AI Builders Conference, coming up this April 28th to 30th, 2026 in Boston and virtually. Learn more at odsc.ai/east and use the code podcast for an exclusive 10% discount. We're also bringing back the Agentic AI Summit, a virtual 3-week conference this January 21st to February 5th. Learn more at summit.ai. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of ODSC's AIX podcast. My name is Alex Landa, and I'm the head of content here at ODSC AI. Today, we are joined by Kelli Quinn. Kelli is the Director of Product and Customer Success at Vioxx. In her role, she blends her creative instincts with strategic execution to help shape cutting-edge AI solutions in generative machine learning, ensuring customers harness algorithm inventing AI for measurable impact. And with that, Kelli, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me.
First of all, why don't you tell us a bit more about your background and how you got to where you are today?
Excellent. Yeah. As you mentioned, I currently work for an AI startup called Vioxx. But if we back up and talk about my history, it's a very unlikely road into tech. I picked up my first camera in junior high, and I knew I would be telling stories that way for the rest of my life. And that has proven to be true. I worked as a photographer for 2 decades. So I come from an artist and creative background, not from a tech background. And then I was fortunate enough that while working as a photographer, I had my own freelance business, but I also got to work in the corporate sector as well. And I have a very ADHD brain that loves novelty. So I've been able to dabble in so many things, which each thing has informed the next. I've been able to work in customer service, in marketing, in corporate event planning, gosh, in the education sector, creative direction. I've done in-house photography in addition to my own freelance business. I started my own uh, company workshop where I teach other photographers how to do what I have done and build what I built. And all of those things have, like I said, informed the next. And it's amazing how each industry actually translates to each other. So yeah, that's a bit about my background. And like I said, a very unlikely road into tech, but I was offered this job for this AI startup, and I literally looked at the CEO and I was like, "Are you nuts? Like, what am I going to do in the tech space? I'm not I'm not technical. I'm a creative brain person. I'm a people person. I love human psychology and understanding why we do the things we do as humans." And he was like, "That's why I need you. Like, I need your creativity. I need your humanity. We've got the nerds that can do the nerd stuff. I need you to be able to help us do the people stuff and integrate AI with the people." And as we talked more, I was like, "All right, let's go. Let's see what this industry is like since I've dabbled in so many others." And it's been a really cool ride so far. I've been here for 18 months and don't plan to stop anytime soon.
I feel like people just sort of end up in AI inevitably or tech, like all careers lead
All
to AI.
roads lead to here.
Exactly. How does that experience as being creative work, particularly with AI, which is commonly a field known for being kind of soulless or not creative?
Yeah, I love this question because to me, I think creativity often gets lumped with artistry or, like being an artist or something in that vein. And the reality is creativity bleeds into everything. It's how we exist in the world. It's how we approach problems. It's how we find solutions. It bleeds into everything. So I have met so many very technical, logistical people that say, "Oh, I'm not creative." And I'm like, wait. Like, you're not calling that art, that code that you built, that infrastructure to build up that whole entire API or whatever it is. I think that we just allow that term just to get lumped with artists, and I disagree with that across the board. I think that creativity, just like I said, it bleeds into everything. And so while my creative muscle has been primarily flexed in that artistic realm, it's really fun to get to explore it and flex it here in the day-to-day elements of my job. Um, and also like how I like my approach with people. So I mentioned before that every job that I've had, I feel like it's where, like, creativity and human beings meet, and that makes so much sense. Let's say in my photography realm, right? Like, my clients are human beings, and I'm working with them in real time to create art that they wanna hang on their walls. But or, like, for a brand that, they can use for ads to sell their product. But when we're talking about AI, like, we're building an AI product, but this product is going to be used by human beings. And like, we already know AI is gonna do the work for us now. That's not the question anymore. The question is, like, who decides what work actually matters? So do you have the right people in your organization who know how to ask the right questions to get the right answers and even know, like, are we getting good output? Because we all have access to all these same LLMs. So if we're all putting the same generic stuff into them and getting the same generic stuff out, then what's setting us apart? Where are we infusing our humanity and our creativity to get something different? And I think remembering the humanity and like always keeping a pulse on that humanity in everything that we're doing helps the AI side of things not be so soulless. Um, I'll give an example actually of something that we did at VX a few months ago. We realized, like I said, we're a really new startup and we realized, okay, we're going to need a CRM tool. We're going to need some sort of tool to like keep track of all of our customers and make sense of all of this. And so I was able to use my human knowledge, who's worked in the customer service industry for years, of like, what does this tool need to have and how is it most going to be successful? And then we have an engineer who has actually built a CRM tool at a past company. So we're like, okay, he's going to know his human knowledge, knows the infrastructure and how to lay that groundwork. And then let's get creative with AI. How much can AI do for us? So between the two of us and AI, we built a CRM tool in the matter of a few weeks. And it's this really exciting living, breathing organism which when you use a CRM tool, typically that's gonna be a third party software, and they're gonna tell you that it's custom.
I agree with that because I feel like something I hear a lot about, especially in relationships, is there's a creative person and then there's a logical person. And yes and no. I think
Mhm.
creativity and artistry are not the same thing, often similar. But I think about one of my friends who is very much so science brained, very logic, very numbers driven. But then he finds creative approaches for what he does in the tech space of, well, I found a loophole by going in the back end, this and that. Like, I think the when you say creative in AI, it doesn't mean making a pretty picture. It means creative prompts, as you said, or unique approaches to things.
And it can be, right? So, what's so cool is like our engineer and I being creative in AI, he was creative in creating that, like, infrastructure, and then I was creative in making it pretty, in doing the UX and the UI and the front end and making it, very aesthetic. So it's like it gets to be both.
Hmm.
And I love what you were saying about, in a relationship, it's like, oh, you've got the analytical person and then you've got the creative person. And it's like there's just so much more nuance than that, and there's so much more overlap than that, and I think when we shove ourselves into these boxes, then sometimes which I'll admit, I kind of did at the beginning, right? Like, I was saying, "Oh, well, I'm not the technical one. I'll just do this because 'cause I'm not technical." And then one of our engineers called me out on it, and he was like, "Well, you're a fast learner. Let me just teach you this." Because there was a piece of the puzzle that I would keep tossing over to his side of the tossing over the fence to his yard, being like, "Oh, hey, I did this. Will you do this now?" And he's like, "This actually isn't that hard, and then I don't have to be your bottleneck. Like, you can do this." So he spent the half hour to teach me, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, that actually isn't bad at all." And when I think about so many of the creative things that I've done, let's say in like Photoshop and Lightroom and InDesign, there's actually a lot of technicality in those
Mm.
programs and you learn it. And so there's just, yeah, there's so much more crossover. There's so much more nuance, which helps us all like break out of our boxes a little bit.
I agree. Um, so you've mentioned your company a lot, and before we get into some of the broader questions, why don't you tell us a little more about what VX does?
Yeah, this is a great question. Um, so gosh, to give you like a little bit of a longer backstory, our CEO, his name's Jepson Taylor. He's the biggest dreamer I've ever met and one of the most creative people that I've ever met, and also wildly technical and intelligent when it comes to AI and computer things. And a little over 10 years ago, as different advances were happening in AI, he was like, "Oh my goodness, I think this thing is possible." And he started printing out algorithms on sheets of paper and taking scissors and cutting them up and rearranging them, trying to see if this idea he had was possible. And he's been plugging at it ever since. And it was, gosh, 2 years ago ish when he realized, okay, it is possible. I can't not chase this down. And he quit his job as the chief AI strategist at a large tech company. He was at Data IQ at the time, and he was like, "I have to chase this down. I can't not do this." And so what we do at VX is we take legacy algorithms invented by human beings, and we decompose them into stages. So I'm gonna put it in lay terms because I love an analogy as a creative person. It's almost like you take a loaf of bread and it's like, yeah, this bread is great. Bread is versatile and bread can be used for a lot of things. So, like these legacy algorithms, a lot of people are using them for a lot of industries, a lot of, to create solutions for a lot of different problems. But at Viox, we're saying, okay, what if we take the bread and what if we like roll it back to the original ingredients in the bread? So we've got all of our ingredients, and then we decide what exactly do we want to make that's very custom and very specific to this very unique problem. And we can add ingredients. We're not stuck with just the original ingredients of bread. So let's say, you've been invited to go to a dinner party and they say, "I'd like you to bring dessert." And originally, all that was available to you was loaves of bread. And now you're like, "Ooh, I'm gonna roll this back. I wanna bring orange raspberry glaze rolls," like cinnamon rolls, glaze rolls. And so then you decompose, you have all the ingredients, you add the ingredients you need, you recompose, and then you get to show up to the party with this very specific, beautiful dessert offering. So then, like, going back to how this works technically, you got the algorithm, you decompose it into stages, you add in whatever else you need to, you recompose it and plug it in to be the solution to your problem. So essentially, it is creating like this very complex data analytics tool that gets to be very proprietary to your organization, to what it is that you're doing. Um, so, in a nutshell, that's kind of, we're decomposing algorithms to invent new algorithms on the fly. So, it's AI that's inventing itself. So, when it's in stages and it's adding new ingredients, those new ingredients are added by AI, not by humans. And so, humans are limited by, gosh, time, by the amount of knowledge we have in our head, by our own biases. And the AI isn't limited by those same things. So it can invent on the fly way faster and more efficient and more effective algorithms. And then we can just fine tune and get so custom for every customer and every problem that we put in there.
Talked about imposter syndrome when it comes to creative work, probably photography side of things. So, how did transitioning into tech change that, if it did? And do you have any advice for people also struggling with imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I mentioned my journey out of photography, right? So when I had decided, all right, I'm going to do this thing, I'm going to take this job with VX, I decided to give myself a month break. 1 month to just like take a breather, catch up on the rest of my editing and like transition into this new role. I don't know, there was resistance there on my end. And I realized like I am not an imposter. Like I'm really good at this. I could have been charging this all along. So I took that little piece of information and then I coupled it with like coming into this tech space, I coupled it with something that Jepson, my boss, told me. So when he hired me, he said, I want you to walk into every room like you belong there. I want you to walk into every space and own it like you're meant to be there. And I decided I was going to do that like full force. No questions asked. Like I'm just going to shoulders back, head up, walk into every room like I deserve to be there just like anybody else. I am here with the skills and the talents that I have, and they are different than the skills and the talents of all of my coworkers in this case, because I work in a very technical company. But that actually is my superpower. So if I don't feel like an imposter, then that makes me unafraid to ask questions because I'm not an imposter. I'm here for a reason. So every time I don't understand something, I just ask. I'm like, "Hey, I've never heard that term before. Can you like lean into that a little more and help me understand?" Or now this idea, is that something that a customer also is going to know or is this jargon of data scientists and our customers are going to be confused? And the more questions that I ask, the more I realize that I'm not the only one in the room with the question. And then the more clarity we can have as a team and as an organization and create something that's more successful. So to touch on your question of like what advice I would give someone, it's that advice that Jepson gave to me of like walk into every room like you belong there, you know, plugging it into an LLM like, "Hey, explain this thing to me." And I realized I was wasting so much time doing that all on the back end, and when I did it real time, we had so many beautiful discussions that led to so much clarity as a whole and as a team, um, and then I realized asking the question too, almost like where my fear was that people would think, "Oh, she doesn't know a lot." Being brave enough to ask the question almost gives you like more credibility in a lot of instances because you're unafraid to admit that you don't know something.
I love that quote, walk into every room like you belong there. It's, I'll definitely meet people who, especially going to ODSC conferences where it's like, wow, these are really smart people. I probably seem really dumb compared to them. Then you take a step back and it's like, we're not dumb. We just have different types of intelligence.
Yeah.
And that goes into the bigger philosophical debate of what is intelligence and subjective, I'd
Mhm.
say, different types of intelligence, but owning what you do know, because especially someone like us who might be the more creative, uh, interpersonal side of things, that's a strength. We might not know programming to the depth that these people do. Maybe we're a little better with people than some of these other folks. And there's no right or wrong. There's just different strengths.
Mhm. And that better with people strength keeps showing up to be helpful,
Hmm.
especially in this tech space. I've found that like my ability to understand people and work with people has built so many really cool relationships with like our engineers and these technical people that I work with that we end up having conversations that I don't think we would have had otherwise, that I don't know that like the engineers are having with each other necessarily about life and, frustrations and things that help me understand them better and better show up for them in a leadership role, creating an environment that's helpful for them.
I always suggest that people like friends in undergrad or when I used to know people in undergrad, regardless of your major or career aspirations, take a comm class and a psychology class. They will help you immensely. Like just knowing how to work, even at one level deeper than what you already know, is going to make a huge difference.
Mhm.
So, on the topic of these skills, what skills do teams need to develop to excel in a creative plus tech environment?
Yeah, I love that. Honestly, creating a culture where everyone's voice holds value. So, there is a lot of study that has gone into, aviation safety, and it's so fascinating to me, and I'm gonna paraphrase a bunch here, but, they were finding that safety issues and plane crashes and things were actually happening more often when the captain was flying versus the co-captain, and they were like, "Curious, let's dig in more and figure out what this is about." And it ended up being about psychological safety and cultural hierarchy and so many things, and I'll explain it. So when the captain is flying, and there's a few things that might happen. Maybe the co-captain sees something and feels like, "Oh, I'm not gonna speak up because, like, they know what they're doing. They've got more experience than me. Like, they've probably already noticed it and it's not a big deal." So maybe they don't feel, like, brave enough or bold enough or safe enough to speak up. And then another thing happens where, like, maybe they do speak up and maybe the captain's like, "Meh, this is a newbie. They don't have a lot of experience. I know what I'm doing." And that, like, that advice is disregarded. Um, and there's so many more details that go into it. But at the root of it, it's like you have to create that psychological safety that everyone gets to speak up and everybody's voice matters, that it holds weight. And then that cultural hierarchy of like, it doesn't matter what role you hold, like you have a seat at the table, like you get to show up like you belong there, right? Um, in our current company, one thing that I love is when I first showed up, I'm coming with my typical background and the corporate world. And I was like, all right, let's start to flesh out an org structure as we begin hiring. And Jepson was like, I don't wanna. He's like, I don't want an org structure that looks like a triangle. He's like, I want an org chart that looks like a circle. And I was like, okay, say more. Like, I'm interested. He was like, we are all on the same team. So I don't want anyone to feel like someone else's role is higher up on the ladder and therefore like more important because what so and so is doing in ops and finance is just as important as what so and so is doing in engineering building out this API as what you're doing, with our products and customers. And it's been really fun to get to build it out like that and communicate that to our team to where everyone really does feel like their voice matters and they can speak up. And you have to like do a lot of unlearning to create that culture. So I like many times I'll be on a call with an engineer and they'll be like, yeah, well, it doesn't really make sense to me why we're doing it this way, but I'm sure he knows, I'm sure Jepson knows what he's doing. So we'll just keep pressing forward. And I was like, no, no, if it doesn't make sense to you, then ask. If it doesn't make sense, then like, he's like, "Well, I'm sure he's got." I'm like, "Okay, so if he has a plan, then he'll say that and then it'll make sense to all of us. Or maybe you thought of something that he wasn't aware of because you have different life experience and you have different skills and different, you know, things that you're good at and things that you notice." And so it's taken some unlearning on all of our parts to like and myself included. There were so many things at the beginning that I didn't speak up that I was like I always kicked myself for. And now I'm like training myself that, like, when comes up, speak up. And, like, that doesn't mean your idea is gonna get taken, but at least you've said the thing, started the conversation, and now, like, we're all on the same page heading in the direction that we've decided to go together. So, I think that that would be the biggest skill that I think a team could develop is that cultural environment where everyone's voice holds value.
I like that because even if an idea isn't accepted or implemented, it opens up the conversation and seeds that interest that will lead to change down the line. You
Mhm.
would start off by saying, hey, I just saw this viral thing. from a marketing perspective, why don't we try something similar? Maybe the first time it doesn't get implemented, but then when you have some evidence piling up, eventually you can say, all right, we've been talking about this for a while. This person's on board. This person's on board. Can we allocate
Mhm.
just a couple of resources to give it a try? And then, it'll seed and it'll spiral. And eventually it might be something big, or it might be nothing at all, but at least you can say you tried and you
Right.
learned something.
And I love that perspective because there have been several things where a team member will speak up and it's like, "Oh, that's such a cool idea. We can't do that at this stage, but let's have that be a future iteration. But because we know we want that to be a future iteration, let's lay the right groundwork so we can get there." Where if they hadn't spoken up in that moment, maybe they knew, like, I don't know if we can swing this right now. And so they didn't speak up and then we didn't lay the groundwork. We might not be able to do it in stage 2 or stage 3 or
Mm.
whatever. Right. But by speaking up and throwing it out there, then it's like, ooh, yes, let's lay a couple of breadcrumbs here so we can get there in 6 months, in 12 months, in whatever. So, I don't.
Great. That's how some of the biggest changes happen when you start small and then the results pile up and you can't deny it. And
Mhm.
blah, a game changing product or campaign. So we just talked a bit about the company wide mindset a bit. So how do you embrace that creativity? And this goes beyond just asking questions. And it sounds like Jepson and some other teammates are pretty open to different ways of thinking. So how do you embrace creativity rather than focusing on things like optimization, ROI, efficiency, the usual business keywords?
Yeah, okay. It's easier said than done sometimes, honestly. I think there's like a three-part structure to embracing this sometimes, and it starts with knowing that we're all on the same team. So, knowing we're all on the same team and we know what our vision is and where we're headed, then in order to embrace creativity, here's where that three-part structure comes in, is you have to be willing to set aside your ego. You have to be willing to embrace the sunk cost fallacy, and you have to be willing to pivot. And I'm gonna give you a specific example of what I mean. So, Jepson had given me and an engineer, an assignment of creating a web platform where we could where, like, our customers can use the product, right? And he gave us a couple of parameters, but basically told us, like, "Figure it out, come up with this web platform." And so me and this engineer, we get heads down, we're brainstorming, and me as an artist, I'm literally storyboarding, sheet of paper, pencil, drawing it out. Where are the buttons gonna go? What's the layout gonna look like? And so we get this assignment one day. The next morning, so we're less than 24 hours later. We've spent a lot of brain cycles on this, a lot of time. We're feeling pretty jazzed. Like the engineer had built the back end. It's still very basic, but we've got this great idea. We're super excited. And we had hit a point where we had a couple of questions. And so, we said, "Hey, Jeff, can you meet with us on a couple of these questions real quick?" And he's like, "Yeah, actually, I'm really excited to show you something I've been working on." And we're like, "Okay." So he let us go first and we show him what we have and we ask our questions. And then he shows us what he's been working on. And homeboy, in less than 24 hours, showed us up in like giant waves. He'd built an entire web platform. He just had this idea. He's like, I'm going to do it backwards. Like, rather than build it from the ground up, I'm going to throw it all into AI and build out the whole thing, and then we'll reverse engineer it. And so he's walking us through, and this thing's beautiful. It's so cool. It can do all of these things. So, like, Jordan, the engineer, and I, we had to set aside our ego and be like, okay, he he one upped us. This is better. What he's done here is better than the thing we came up with. And then we had to embrace the sunk cost fallacy by being like, yeah, we spent a lot of brain cycles. Yeah, we spent a lot of hours and a lot of time on this thing, and this is better. What he's come up with is better. So we're actually just ditching all of that. Like, we're not going to stick our heels down and like keep going down that road because we've spent this much time, like we're ditching all of that. And then we're embracing the pivot. So rather than like staying stuck of like, "Ugh, why would he even assign this to us if he's just going to do it better anyway, Because when he assigned it to us, his plan wasn't to do it himself. But his aha light bulb moment that came probably way too late to reach out to any of us was like, I got to run down this path because his creativity was like, I think this is the right answer. Um, so that example is something that happens over and over and over again in what we're doing here because we're running so fast and we're chasing the goal so relentlessly that we keep having to do that three-part process of like set aside your own ego and do the thing that's best for the team. Um, and when you're working somewhere where creativity is a top value, that's going to keep happening because you're going to keep doing things in ways that aren't traditional, right? So, building a product backwards, this engineer who builds beautiful architecture and code, he's like, breaks my brain a little bit to do
Yeah.
this backwards. And he's like, I'm gonna figure it out. And he had to have that willingness, right? And then a few hours in, we were both just like, oh, this is so rad. This is so cool. And we realized that like, I think we might need to do lots of things this way. Let's try what else can we build backwards, like, because it was so much faster and AI thought of things that we didn't even think about. Because when Jordan and I storyboarded, we came up with a phase 1, 2, and 3, this is what we can do now, here's what we can do later. And it was at stage 5 or phase 5 out the gate of stuff that I was like, I didn't even think of that. But yes, of course we would want that. Of course we want this feature. And it's already built out and beautiful. And then we just have to reverse engineer it and make it work for our specific product. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's a really fun approach of embracing new tactics, creativity, uh, breaking things to fix it functionally. So we've talked a lot about individuals and team dynamics. So how has it been working on the sales side of things coming from this kind of approach? Because when I have seen sales teams in the past, it tends to be a little more systematic, a little more boring, so to speak. So how does being a creative person with a fairly creative company, I'd say, of doing things differently, how does that work with potential clients or customers?
that is a great question. Like I said, when he asked if I would help on the sales front, like my own baggage just came in of like, ugh, I don't want to be a salesperson. And nothing against salespeople. I just and like all of a sudden felt that imposter syndrome of like, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to sell things. And then two things happened. One, he told me to approach it like making friends, which I'm like, ooh, that's my sweet spot. Yes, I can do that. And then I also had to like go back to like owning my skills. And it's like I was a freelancer for 20 years. I had to sell myself all the time, but I didn't put it in that verbiage to myself. Like, but I realized like, oh, all of these skills and tools you gained, getting clients in photography, it's the same thing. Like, and so I was like, all right, we're going to approach this differently. Coming into selling tech, Jepson has the same concept where he says, let's not sell to the bottom. Let's sell straight to the top. Let's get right in at the C-suite level to the people who are making the decisions, who are in the rooms. And so that's another way that we're creatively doing it different. And it seems to be working for us that we're starting the conversations with the people who have the power to make the decision.
Very ballsy approach.
It's definitely audacious and something that comes natural to both Jepson and I, which probably makes us a good duo.
So we've spoken a lot about the skills for creativity and how that blends into technology and AI. So, for anybody listening who might have a creative background or is interested in using their creative interest in technology, what advice would you have for those people who are interested in the creative side, but still working in the tech space?
That is a great question. I would say a couple of things. So it used to be that we would hire people looking for a T. So someone who's just like drilled down and they are an expert in this field, right? And now with AI filling so many gaps and also there's so much information at our fingertips. Companies are looking for more well-rounded people. So we're looking for more of a circle or a box of someone who has like varying talents in different things. Like if I'm looking at our employees at Viox, we've got, gosh, almost every employee also has spoken on stages across
Mm.
the globe. And we've got multiple employees who are authors. So it's like we've got these employees that are very well rounded and very well versed. So if you're a creative person and you're wanting to get into tech, I would say like sit down and figure out like what are your strengths? What are you bringing to the table? Um what can you offer a company? And it's probably going to be something that has nothing to do with tech and that's your superpower. So own that. So like in my case, it's like being this people person, being someone who can communicate well with others and play nice with others, right? And being someone who does think outside of the box and who is a little bit scrappy in finding answers to questions. So like sit down, figure out what your strengths are and don't be shy. And like don't minimize experiences. I know a lot of people who've been like stay-at-home mothers, and they're like, "Oh, well, I was just a mom." And I was like, "You were the CEO of a household. You were running an entire operation and like keeping a really intense calendar and you're also, a short order cook and like really like bring it all up, bring it all to the table. Cause for me, I've done a lot of hiring in various positions. And someone that has been a parent and managed a household, that person's a huge asset to me because I'm like, they can keep a lot of balls in the air at the same time. They thrive in chaos and they can handle a lot going on. And especially in the startup realm, like that's a huge asset and a huge skill. So I would say like really list out, really figure out what are my skills and then don't be afraid to go get a little bit of training. If um if you haven't worked in the corporate space, then it's like go take a training on even just Excel products or sorry, Microsoft products to know how to use Word and Excel and whatever. Or if you want to even take like depends how much tech you want to be in. Like, do you want to take a web dev class or a coding class? Or there are things out there that, a 6 weeks course here or a little certification there that you can be like, okay, I have a base knowledge of dot dot dot, right? Because I came into tech not having a base knowledge of anything coding. I had a base knowledge of corporate things and Excel and that sort of stuff but I've learned it on the job, and I'm very fortunate to have that opportunity. But had I had any sort of training, that would have just helped me that much more. So then I'm in rooms, and when the conversation is happening, there are things not going over my head, and I can participate in the conversation. So that would be my advice as a good starting point.
Embrace what makes you unique. Don't discredit experiences, even if not job related, and fill in gaps with training.
Yeah.
That's what I
Thank you
need.
for summarizing me so eloquently.
Anything else you want to share about creativity, about your experience, about your company, anything like that?
Gosh, I feel very lucky to get to be doing what I'm doing and having so many unique life experiences. And I would say a lot of luck is in the audacity, right? When we were talking earlier about sales, you're like, that's an audacious approach or a bold approach. I can't remember what word you used. And it's like, I guess I would just challenge anyone out there of like, we only get this one wild and precious life. So if there's something you want to do, have the audacity to just go for it, because it's already it's already not happening. So the answer is already no right now. So you don't have a lot to lose and be audacious and go for the thing and then be willing to pivot if you don't like it. Um I did photography, like I said, for 2 decades, 20 years, and I loved it and I was really good at it. And I was like, I think I'm ready for something different. And I gave myself permission to take this leap into tech, knowing I may hate it. And so I just gave myself that permission. Like, I'm going to try it. If I hate it, I'm going to give myself permission to try something different, to go leap into something else. And I have been lucky that I've really enjoyed it. And when I hit parts that I don't enjoy, I figure out how to make that work, if I can weasel out of that role or if I can, embrace it for as long as I need to, whatever I need to do. But giving yourself permission to pivot and just try everything that feels exciting to you.
I love that. I especially like the mentality of the answer is already no, because if there's a job you want, well, you're not there. So maybe use that standard advice of reach out to people on LinkedIn or try a different approach in your cover letter. Something like that might be actually what sets you apart.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, Kelli, this was wonderful. Thank you for inspiring me, being a creative person in the tech world. And I hope that everybody who listens to this is equally inspired.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time.
All right. Thank you for that. Bye now.
All right. Bye-bye.
This episode is sponsored by ODSC AI East, the premier AI Builders Conference coming up this April 20th to 30th, 2026 in Boston and virtually. Learn more at odsc.ai/east, and don't forget to use the code PODCAST for an exclusive 10% discount. Supporting our podcast by subscribing not only helps our small dedicated team at ODSC AI, but also unlocks exclusive benefits for you. Your engagement directly contributes to the growth and success of our community. Please subscribe now and don't miss out on the next enlightening episode.